The Eco Hotel conference hall buzzed with the energy of Lagos's business elite. Champagne glasses clinking and business cards exchanging hands like currency. Adora Okafor smoothed down her navy blazer, took a deep breath, and reminded herself why she was here. This networking event was her chance to pitch her marketing strategy to potential clients who could elevate her small consultancy from struggling to thriving. She'd been circulating for an hour, making connections, but she found herself in a discussion circle debating the future of digital marketing in Nigeria. That's when she first heard his voice, sharp, dismissive, cutting through the polite corporate speak like a knife. Traditional advertising is dead weight. Anyone still investing heavily in print and radio is either nostalgic or incompetent. Adora turned to see who'd spoken with such arrogant certainty. The man was tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, with an air of authority that filled the space around him. His name tag read, Obiora Nduka, CEO, Nduka Properties Limited. She recognized the name. Obiora Nduka was a legend in Lagos real estate, a self-made millionaire who'd built his empire from nothing by age 28. Now 32, he was known for two things: his business acumen and his brutal honesty that bordered on cruelty. That's an oversimplification, Adora found herself saying before she could stop herself. Traditional media still reaches demographics that digital can't touch effectively. A balanced approach is what consultants say when they're too afraid to commit to real strategy. Obiora interrupted, his dark eyes fixing on her with an intensity that felt like being x-rayed. Let me guess. You run a small marketing firm. You tell clients what they want to hear instead of what they need to hear, and you wonder why you're not growing. The circle had gone quiet. Adora felt heat rising to her face, a mixture of embarrassment and anger. You don't know anything about my business, she said, keeping her voice level despite the rage building in her chest. I know you're wrong about traditional media, he said with a slight smirk, and I know that defensive tone means I hit close to home. And I know that you talk like a man who has no wife at home to teach you manners. Adora shot back, her composure cracking. With that harsh mouth, no woman will ever marry someone like you. Maybe that's why you have to buy respect instead of earning it. The words hung in the air like a slap. For just a moment, something flickered across Obiora's face, hurt, quickly masked by cold anger. The circle of people had grown larger, sensing drama. At least I have something to buy it with, he said quietly, his voice now ice instead of fire. Unlike consultants who peddle outdated advice to clients too desperate to know better. He turned and walked away, leaving Adora shaking with humiliation and fury. Several people in the circle wouldn't meet her eyes. She'd been publicly dismantled by one of Lagos's most powerful businessmen, and worse, she'd lost her composure and attacked him personally. That night, lying in her small apartment in Surulere, Adora replayed the encounter over and over. His arrogance, his casual cruelty, the way he dismissed her so completely. But also, that brief flash of hurt when she'd mentioned no woman marrying him. She'd struck a nerve, clearly. Good, she thought bitterly. Let him feel a fraction of what he made me feel. She had no way of knowing that her words would haunt Obiora Nduka for the next 3 years, that they'd echo in his mind during lonely dinners in his empty mansion, that they'd resurface whenever he caught himself being unnecessarily harsh. She didn't know that his ex-fiancée had left him just 2 months before that networking event, saying almost the exact same thing: "You're too harsh, too cold." No woman wants to spend her life with someone who speaks to people like they're beneath him. Adora also didn't know that in exactly 3 years, she'd be standing in front of Obiora Nduka again, but this time begging. 3 years passed. Adora's consultancy had grown modestly. Not the explosive success she dreamed of, but steady, honest work that paid the bills and supported her family. She'd almost forgotten about Obiora Nduka, relegating him to the category of unpleasant memories best left buried. Then her father collapsed. Chief Okafor had been the pillar of their family, a retired civil servant who'd sacrificed everything to educate his 3 children. When he fell ill with kidney failure, the family rallied. Adora depleted her savings for the initial treatment. Her younger brother Chaik, only 23 and fresh out of university, took a loan from a local lender to cover the dialysis costs. They thought it would be enough. They were wrong. Chief's condition deteriorated. The doctors recommended an immediate kidney transplant, a procedure costing 15 million Nigerian nairas. Money they didn't have. Money they couldn't get through legitimate means fast enough. That's when Chaik made the mistake that would alter all their lives. Desperate and terrified of losing their father, Chaik had gone to a loan shark, a man called Emeka Cash Okonkwo, who operated in the gray areas of Lagos finance. Emeka had given him 10 million Nigerian nairas at an interest rate that should have been illegal. Chaik had taken it without telling anyone, thinking he could manage the repayments with his new job. The transplant happened. Chief survived. And then the bills kept coming, post-operative care, medications, complications. The 10 million Nigerian nairas disappeared like water through cupped hands. Emeka Cash wanted his money back. With interest, the debt had ballooned to 15 million Nigerian nairas. He gave them 2 weeks. Adora discovered the truth when 2 of Emeka's men showed up at their family home in Igbita, making their expectations very clear. Pay, or the family would lose everything. Their father's life, their mother's health, their home, Chaik's future, everything. "We've been patient," one of the men had said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "But Mr. Emeka's patience has a price. Every day you delay adds 50,000 Nigerian nairas to your debt, and if you can't pay in cash." He looked around the modest house meaningfully. "We'll take it in assets." After they left, Adora had held her sobbing brother while their father slept in the next room, recovering and unaware of the new crisis his survival had cost. Chaik had been trying to save their father's life. She couldn't blame him for the method, only for the desperation that had driven him to it. She had 2 weeks to find 15 million Nigerian nairas. Adora spent the next 10 days in a humiliating marathon of asking for help. She approached her former clients. Doors closed. She reached out to her mother's church connections, sympathy, but no substantial help. She applied for bank loans, denied for lack of collateral. She contacted old university friends. Most were struggling themselves. On day 11, she sat in her apartment at 2 a.m., staring at a list of possibilities that had dwindled to nothing. She'd sold everything she owned of value. She'd begged, pleaded, explained. Nothing had worked. That's when she saw it, buried in her old contacts list. A name she tried to forget, Obiora Nduka, the man who'd humiliated her, the man she'd struck back at with cutting words, the man who, despite being arrogant and harsh, was known for one thing. He kept his word in business. If he agreed to a deal, he honored it. The thought of approaching him made her physically ill. But what choice did she have? Her father's life hung in the balance. Her brother's future was at stake. Her family's survival depended on her swallowing her pride and doing the unthinkable. The next morning, Adora put on her best remaining outfit, a simple but professional dress, and headed to Victoria Island, to the gleaming high-rise that housed Nduka Properties Limited, to face the man who called her incompetent 3 years ago. To beg. The receptionist told her Mr. Nduka didn't take walk-in appointments. Adora sat in the lobby for 4 hours, refusing to leave. Finally, probably out of annoyance at her persistence, Obiora's assistant agreed to give him her message. 20 minutes later, Adora was shown into an office that screamed success. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lagos, minimalist furniture that cost more than most people's cars, awards and photos documenting Obiora's rise to power. And there he was. Obiora Nduka looked up from his desk, and for a moment neither spoke. He looked exactly as she remembered. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, that air of absolute confidence. But something had changed. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. A weariness beneath the authority. "Adora Okafor," he said finally, his voice neutral. "The woman who told me no one would ever marry me. This is unexpected." She forced herself to meet his gaze. "I need help." Clearly. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "The proud marketing consultant from the Eco Hotel. You told me I bought respect instead of earning it. Now you're here to, what? Ask me to buy your respect." "I'm here to ask for a business loan," Adora said, hating how her voice shook slightly. 15 million Nigerian nairas. I can pay it back over 5 years with reasonable interest. Collateral? I I don't have traditional collateral, but I have my business, my skills, my word. Your word? Obiora's smile was cold. The word of a woman who called me unmarriageable in front of a room full of people. Adora felt her eyes burn with tears she refused to let fall. I was angry. You humiliated me professionally, and you humiliated me personally. We're even. He stood, turning to look out the window at Lagos sprawling below. Why do you need 15 million Nigerian nairas, Adora? She told him. Everything. Her father's illness, Chaik's desperate loan, the sharks circling her family, the impossible deadline. She laid bare her desperation, her fear, her complete lack of options. When she finished, Obiora was silent for a long moment. No, he said finally. The word hit her like a physical blow. Please. I said no. Your business can't support that kind of loan. You have no collateral. It's a bad investment. He turned back to face her, his expression unreadable. Unless... Hope flickered. Unless what? Unless you prove me wrong about something. What? Obiora's smile was bitter, sardonic. You said no woman would ever marry me, that I was unmarriageable. Here's my offer. Marry me, and I'll pay off your family's debt completely. Every naira. Adora stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What? You heard me. The only way I'll help your family is if you become my wife. He crossed his arms, clearly expecting her to refuse, to storm out, to call him insane. Instead, Adora went very, very still. Her mind raced through calculations. Her father's life, her brother's future, her mother's health, the threat hanging over everything they had. Against what? Her pride? Her dignity? Her freedom? If I agree, she said slowly, you'll pay the entire debt? 15 million Nigerian nairas? Obiora's smirk faltered. I wasn't serious. I'm serious. You made an offer. I'm accepting. Will you pay the debt if I marry you? He stared at her, clearly shocked that his cruel joke had been taken literally. Adora, I was being sarcastic. Were you? She stepped closer, her voice steady now, powered by desperate determination. You made an offer in front of a witness. She glanced at his assistant, who stood frozen in the doorway. A man of your reputation wouldn't go back on his word. So I'm asking clearly, if I agree to marry you, will you pay my family's debt? Obiora looked trapped, caught between his own pride and the unexpected calling of his bluff. If he backed down now, he'd look like a man who didn't keep his word. If he went forward, he'd be trapped in a marriage with a woman who clearly despised him. Fine, he said finally, his jaw tight. Marry me and I'll pay the debt. All of it. I need terms. Terms? How long? What are the conditions? Obiora laughed, but there was no humor in it. 1 year. We marry. You prove that someone would marry me. We maintain appearances. And after 1 year, we divorce quietly. You never have to see me again. And my family's debt is clear immediately. The moment we signed a marriage certificate, Adora extended her hand. Then we have a deal. Obiora looked at her outstretched hand like it was a snake. Slowly, reluctantly, he shook it. His grip was firm, warm, and something in his eyes looked almost like regret. You're really going to do this, he said quietly. Marry someone you think is cruel and unmarriageable just to save your family. Yes, Adora said simply, because they're worth swallowing my pride for. Are you going to back out? No. His voice was harder now, the wall back up. I keep my word, even when I wish I didn't. As Adora left his office, her hand still tingling from the handshake that had sealed her fate, she tried to tell herself she was doing the right thing. 1 year. She could endure 1 year of marriage to a harsh, arrogant man. 1 year to save everyone she loved. She had no idea that the man she just agreed to marry was asking himself the same question she was. What have I done? And neither of them could have guessed that the cruel joke that bound them would become something neither expected. Something that would test them, change them, and ultimately save them both. The wedding took place exactly 1 week later, in a sterile government office in Ikoyi. No flowers, no music, no guests except the required witnesses. Obiora's lawyer and Adaora's brother Chaik, who looked like he might vomit from stress and confusion. Adora wore a simple cream dress she'd owned for years. Obiora wore one of his standard business suits. They stood before the registrar like two strangers at a bus stop, which, essentially, they were strangers bound by a transaction neither fully understood. Do you, Obiora Chukwuma Duca, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. His voice was flat, emotionless. Do you, Adora Chidima Okafor, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Adora looked at Obiora's face, set in stone, giving nothing away, and thought of her father's smile when she told him the medical bills were handled, thought of Chaik's relief when the loan sharks had been paid off in full, thought of her mother's tears of gratitude. I do. The registrar pronounced them married. There was no kiss. They signed the certificate in silence. Within 30 minutes, it was done. Mrs. Adora Nduka. The name felt foreign, like wearing someone else's clothes. Your things are being moved to my house as we speak. Obiora said as they walked to his car, a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. We'll need to maintain the appearance of a real marriage. That means living together. I understand the terms, Adora replied coolly. The drive to his home in Ikoyi was silent, except for the low hum of the air conditioning. Adora stared out the window, watching Lagos slide by, the chaotic energy of the streets giving way to the manicured wealth of the elite neighborhood. Obiora's mansion was even more impressive and intimidating than she'd imagined. Modern architecture, high walls, a security gate, sprawling gardens. The kind of house she'd only seen in magazines. The housekeeper, Patience, will show you to your room, Obiora said as they entered the cavernous foyer with its marble floors and contemporary art. You have your own bedroom, your own bathroom. We maintain separate spaces. Good, Adora said, though something about his clinical tone stung more than she wanted to admit. A middle-aged woman appeared, Patience, presumably, with a warm smile that felt like the first genuine human interaction Adora had experienced all day. Welcome, madam, Patience said, and the kindness in her voice almost broke Adaora's composure. Her room was larger than her entire former apartment. King-size bed, walk-in closet, en-suite bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a garden she'd only glimpsed from the car. It was beautiful. It was a prison. Adora sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself cry. Quiet, bitter tears for the life she'd had, the choices she'd lost, the years stretching ahead of her. The first week of marriage was an exercise in avoidance. Obiora left for work before dawn and returned after dark. They communicated through Patience. Dinner would be at 7. He had a business dinner and wouldn't need her. There was a company function she should attend as his wife. When they did occupy the same space, the tension was thick enough to choke on. They were painfully, meticulously polite, the way strangers are when trapped in an elevator together. But Adora was observant, and living in someone's home, you learn things about them whether you wanted to or not. She learned that Obiora worked compulsively, often until 2 or 3 in the morning, lights blazing in his home office. She learned that he ate most meals alone, usually while reviewing documents or taking calls. She learned that he had no visitors, no friends stopping by, no family dinners, no one but business associates who came and went like transactions. She learned that the harsh, arrogant man from the networking event lived in a mansion that felt more like a museum than a home, beautiful, expensive, and utterly empty of warmth. One evening, 2 weeks into their arrangement, Adora was in the garden, the one space that felt alive in the sterile house, when Obiora came home earlier than usual. She heard him before she saw him, his voice sharp and frustrated on a phone call. I don't care what the contractor says. I hired him to do a job correctly, not to make excuses. Fix it, or I'll find someone who can. He ended the call with more force than necessary and stood there, hand rubbing his temples like his head hurt. That's when he noticed Adora sitting on the garden bench, half hidden by evening shadows. I didn't see you there, he said stiffly. I'm sorry. I'll go inside. No, stay. It's your house too. For now. The reminder stung. For now, as if she could forget this was temporary. Obiora surprised her by sitting on the other end of the bench, maintaining careful distance. They sat in awkward silence for several minutes. "You're always working," Adora found herself saying. "Don't you ever stop?" "Why would I?" He loosened his tie, a rare gesture of relaxation. "Work is reliable. It has rules. You put in effort, you get results. Unlike people. People aren't projects to be managed. No, they're worse. They're unpredictable, emotional, and they leave." He said it matter-of-factly, like stating the weather forecast. Adora studied his profile in the fading light. "Is that what happened?" "Someone left." "Why do you care?" His voice had an edge. "We're not friends, Adora. We're business partners. Don't confuse our arrangement with actual intimacy." She stood to leave, stung by his coldness, but at the garden gate, she paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For what I said at that event. That no woman would marry you. It was cruel, but accurate." Obiora said quietly, "Until you, and you only married me because you had no choice." The truth of it sat heavy between them. Adora had no response that would make it worse. The turning point came during week 3, on a Thursday evening. Adora had just returned from visiting her father. Chief was recovering well. The transplant successful, the debt gone like a nightmare finally lifted. She felt lighter than she had in months, actually smiling as she came to the front door. Then she saw Patience's face. Something was wrong. "What happened?" "It's Mr. Obiora," Patience said, wringing her hands. "He's in his office. He's been in there for hours. He won't eat, won't come out. Something happened at work. Some big deal fell through. I'm worried about him." Adaora's first instinct was to stay out of it. Not my problem, she thought. We're not really married. But something in Patience's genuine concern pulled at her. She knocked on his office door. No response. She knocked again. "Go away, Patience." "I'm fine." "It's not Patience. It's Adora." Silence. Then, "What do you want?" "To check if you're okay." "I'm fine. Leave me alone." Adora tried the door. Unlocked. She pushed it open to find Obiora at his desk, surrounded by papers, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. Tie gone, shirt sleeves rolled up, hair actually messy for the first time since she'd met him. "I said I'm fine," he snapped, but his eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. "You don't look fine." "Well, forgive me for not maintaining appearances in my own office." The sarcasm was biting, but beneath it, she heard something else. Defeat. "What happened?" "Why do you care?" But this time, the question sounded less like an attack, and more like genuine confusion. "Because..." Adora hesitated, not sure herself. "Because you helped my family when no one else would. Because Patience is worried. Because we may not be a real marriage, but we're not enemies either." Obiora stared at her for a long moment. Then, as if the words were pulled from him against his will, "I lost a 200 million Nigerian nairas contract, a development I've been working on for 2 years. The investor pulled out, said I was too difficult to work with, too harsh, too..." He laughed bitterly. "Too unmarriageable, I guess." The echo of her words, the ones that had started all this, hung in the air. Adora sat down in the chair across from his desk. "Tell me about the project." "Why?" "Because I'm a marketing consultant. Maybe I can help you see a different angle." For the next 2 hours, they talked. Really talked. Obiora explained the development. Luxury apartments targeting young professionals. Adora asked questions, pointed out marketing weaknesses in his pitch, suggested alternative investors who might be interested. Slowly, the tension in his shoulders eased. He started listening instead of defending. And Adora saw something she hadn't expected. When Obiora actually listened, when his walls came down even slightly, he was brilliant. Passionate about his work in a way that had nothing to do with money, and everything to do with building something meaningful. "You're not unmarriageable," she said finally, surprising herself. "You're just guarded. There's a difference." Obiora met her eyes across the desk. "You married me for money, not for me. I married you for my family. There's a difference. She stood to leave. Have patience bring you some food. You're no good to anyone if you starve yourself. At the door, his voice stopped her. Thank you for listening. She looked back. In the soft lamplight, exhausted and vulnerable, he looked less like the arrogant businessman who'd humiliated her and more like a man who'd built walls so high he'd trapped himself behind them. You're welcome. That night, lying in her luxurious bed in her gilded cage, Adora realized something unsettling. Obiora Nduka wasn't the monster she'd thought he was. He was just lonely, and somehow that made everything more complicated. The next morning, Adora came downstairs to find Obiora actually eating breakfast at the dining table instead of taking it in his office. Good morning, she said cautiously. Morning. He gestured to the empty chair across from him. You could join me, if you want, since we're supposed to be married. She sat. They ate in silence, but it was a different quality of silence. Less hostile, more uncertain. I'm visiting my father this afternoon, Adora said. The doctors want to check his progress. Do you want to meet him? I mean, he thinks we're really married. It might look strange if my husband never meets my family. Obiora looked surprised. You want me to meet your father? I want to maintain our agreement. Part of that is making this marriage look real. But even as she said it, Adora knew it wasn't the whole truth. All right, I'll clear my afternoon schedule. Chief Okafor was sitting up in bed when they arrived at the family home in Igbita, looking stronger than he had in months. His face lit up when he saw Adora, then showed polite curiosity when Obiora followed her in. Papa, this is Obiora. My husband. Chief studied Obiora with the assessing gaze of a father meeting his daughter's partner. The man who saved my life. I only paid some bills, sir, Obiora said, and Adora was startled by the respect in his voice. Your daughter saved your life by being willing to sacrifice her freedom for her family. Chief looked between them, his intelligent eyes seeing more than they probably wanted him to. Sit, both of you. Tell me how you met. They prepared a story. Met at a business event, reconnected recently, fell in love quickly. The lies came easier than they should have. But then Chief asked, And what do you love about my daughter? Obiora went still. The question had caught him off guard. Adora held her breath. Obiora started, then stopped. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer. She's brave. She walked into my office knowing I might refuse her, knowing she was asking someone who'd humiliated her for help. That takes extraordinary courage. And she's loyal. Everything she did was for this family. He paused. That's rare. Chief smiled. And you, Adora? What do you love about this husband of yours? Adora looked at Obiora, really looked at him, at the man who'd worked until 3 a.m. to help her strategize his project, the man who'd paid her family's crushing debt without hesitation, the man who was so afraid of being used that he pushed everyone away before they could get close. He keeps his word, she said quietly, even when it costs him, even when it's hard. In a world full of people who make promises they don't keep, that means something. The look Obiora gave her was unreadable, but something had shifted in the air between them. As they drove home that evening, the silence in the car was different. Not hostile, not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. You didn't have to say that, Obiora said finally, about me keeping my word. It's true. You didn't have to say nice things about me at all. To your father, you could have stuck to the script. You said nice things about me first. Yeah. He was quiet for a moment. The thing is, I meant them. Adora's heart did something strange in her chest. So, did I? They pulled up to the mansion. Obiora turned off the engine but didn't move to get out. This arrangement, he said slowly. Maybe it doesn't have to be as cold as we planned. We're stuck together for a year. We could try to be, I don't know, civil, maybe even friendly. Friendly, Adora repeated. Is that such a terrible idea? She thought about it. Thought about a year of silent dinners and avoiding each other. Thought about the alternative, actually getting to know this complicated, damaged man she'd married. No, she said finally. It's not terrible. We could try. Okay, then. He got out of the car, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry too. For how I treated you at that networking event. I was going through something. That's not an excuse, but it's the truth. What were you going through? My engagement had just ended, 2 months before we met. She said I was too cold, too focused on work, impossible to love. He said it clinically, like discussing a failed business deal. You telling me no woman would marry me. It hit a nerve because someone had just proven it true. Understanding dawned. Oh. So when you agreed to marry me, even as a business deal, I think part of me saw it as, I don't know, a chance to prove her wrong. Maybe. Stupid, I know. It's not stupid. Adora stood beside him in the driveway of his empty mansion. I think we both entered this arrangement carrying wounds. Maybe we can stop poking at each other's. Obiora extended his hand. Friends? Or at least, friendly strangers who happen to be married? She shook his hand, and this time the touch felt different. Less like a business transaction, more like a possibility. Friends, she agreed. Neither of them knew it yet, but that handshake was more dangerous than the one that had bound them in marriage, because friendship could lead to understanding. Understanding could lead to caring. And caring could lead to something neither of them had bargained for. Something that would make their 1-year deadline feel less like freedom and more like a countdown to losing something precious. Wait, they just went from enemies to living under the same roof. And now they're becoming friends. If you're wondering how this arrangement will backfire, smash that like button. Subscribe to African Tales by Zion because the next chapter shows what happens when a fake marriage starts feeling real. Comment below. Would you marry someone you don't love to save your family? Can friendship turn into something more? Hit that notification bell. This marriage of convenience is about to get complicated. 3 months into their marriage, Adora had learned to read Obiora's moods the way a sailor reads the weather, by subtle signs most people would miss. The sharp tap of his pen against his desk meant he was frustrated with a contractor. The way he loosened his tie before even greeting her meant a meeting had gone badly. The silence that was too quiet meant he was holding back words that would cut if he released them. This morning, all 3 signs were present. Rough day already? Adora asked. Setting down her coffee cup at the breakfast table, they'd started sharing. The Lecky project, Obiora said tersely. The permits are being delayed again. Someone's been paid off to slow us down. I know it. I just can't prove it. Can you go over their heads? Contact someone higher up. I tried, got transferred 5 times, and ended up back where I started. He stabbed at his eggs with more force than necessary. Sometimes I think the entire system exists just to test how much frustration one person can endure before they break. Adora had seen this before. Obiora's sharp tongue was never sharper than when he felt powerless. She'd learned it wasn't personal cruelty. It was armor. When the world pushed back, he pushed harder, using words like weapons because they were the only tools he trusted. What if you approached it differently, she suggested carefully. Instead of demanding action, maybe find out what they actually need. Sometimes delays aren't about money. They're about feeling respected. Obiora looked at her like she'd suggested he build a house out of wishes and fairy dust. You wanted to play nice with corrupt bureaucrats who are deliberately sabotaging my project. I want you to be strategic instead of angry. His jaw tightened. Not everyone responds to kindness, Adora. Some people only respect power. And some people respond to power by becoming more stubborn, which is what's happening now. She kept her voice level, refusing to rise to his defensiveness. I'm not saying you're wrong to be frustrated. I'm saying your approach isn't working. For a moment, she thought he'd snap at her, that defensive wall slamming down between them. But instead, he set down his fork and rubbed his temples. You're right, he said quietly. I'm just tired of fighting for everything, of every single thing being a battle. The admission surprised her. In 3 months, she'd rarely heard Obiora acknowledge vulnerability. Maybe that's the problem, Adora said gently. You treat everything like a war. Sometimes it's just a conversation. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression softened. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You were just too arrogant to notice. A smile tugged at his lips. A real one, rare and transformative. Fair point. Living with Obiora, Adora had discovered layers to him that contradicted everything she'd thought she knew. Yes, he was harsh. But she'd learned his harshness came from a childhood spent fighting for every scrap of success. A poor kid from Adjugunal who'd built an empire through sheer refusal to quit. When you grew up where kindness was often a luxury you couldn't afford, you learned to lead with strength. Yes, he was demanding, but she'd watched him hold his construction workers to exacting standards while paying them above market rate and offering health insurance their competitors didn't. If I'm going to ask for excellence, I'm going to compensate it fairly, he'd said when she'd asked about it. Yes, he was isolated, but she'd started to understand why. She'd seen the way business associates laughed at his jokes a little too hard, agreed with his opinions a little too quickly. Obiora had learned early that his money made him a target. For users, for gold diggers, for people who wanted proximity to power without caring about the person wielding it. How do you know who's real? He'd asked her one evening over dinner. They'd fallen into a routine of eating together. Conversations that started about logistics and somehow became deeper. You don't always, Adora had answered. You trust your instincts, and you give people the chance to prove themselves. And when they prove you right to distrust them, then you were protected by your caution. But if you never trust anyone, you're not protected. You're just lonely. He'd gone quiet then, staring into his wine glass like it held answers. Is that what you think I am? Lonely. I think. Adora had chosen her words carefully. You've built walls so high, even you can't see over them anymore. But Adora wasn't just learning about Obiora. She was learning about herself. She'd expected to hate this arrangement. The loss of freedom, the obligation to a man she'd resented. Instead, she found herself not hating it. The mansion that had felt like a prison now felt like a sanctuary. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't stressed about rent, wasn't juggling bills, wasn't sacrificing her own needs for others. She could breathe. And Obiora, for all his sharp edges, had given her something she hadn't expected: respect. He consulted her on business decisions, valued her marketing insights, treated her not as a purchase bride, but as a partner whose opinion mattered. You're good at this, he'd said one afternoon after she'd helped him restructure a pitch for investors. Why are you wasting your talent on a small consultancy? You could be running marketing for a major firm. Maybe I don't want to run someone else's vision, she'd replied. Maybe I like being my own boss, even if it means smaller scale. Independence over empire? Freedom over fortune. He'd looked at her strangely then. I used to think those were the same thing. The real problem that neither wanted to acknowledge, was that the line between arrangement and reality was blurring. When Obiora came home late, Adora found herself waiting up to make sure he'd eaten. When she had a bad day, she found herself seeking out his presence, his dry observations somehow making her frustrations feel manageable. When they watched movies together on a massive TV, a new habit born from boredom and proximity. She noticed how their shoulders touched, how neither moved away. Friends, they'd agreed. But friends didn't feel this kind of tension. Friends didn't catch themselves staring at each other's mouths during conversations. Friends didn't lie awake thinking about the person sleeping in the room down the hall. The moment Adora realized she was in trouble came during month 4 on a Thursday evening. She'd been in the garden again, her refuge in this house, when she heard shouting from inside. Obiora's voice angry and sharp, followed by Patience's timid responses. Adora hurried inside to find Obiora standing in the kitchen, face thunderous, while Patience looked close to tears. I specifically said I needed those documents for tomorrow's meeting, Obiora was saying, his voice ice cold. How difficult is it to follow simple instructions? I'm sorry, sir, I thought. I don't pay you to think. I pay you to do your job. If you can't handle basic tasks. Obiora. Adora's voice cut through his tirade. That's enough. He turned to her, anger still radiating from him. This doesn't concern you. It does when you're speaking to someone in our home like they're worthless. She moved to stand beside Patience. What happened? She was supposed to print and organize documents from my email. She didn't do it. Did you send the email? Adora asked Patience gently. I I thought I did, sir, but when I checked my sent folder, it's not there. I must have closed it without sending. I'm so sorry. It's an honest mistake, Adora said firmly, looking at Obiora. One that can be fixed. Patience, can you print them now? Yes, madam. Right away. She hurried off, clearly relieved to escape. Obiora's jaw was tight. You undermine me. I stopped you from being cruel to someone who made a simple mistake. She works for me. I have a right to expect competence. You have a right to expect competence, not perfection. And you definitely don't have a right to make her feel small because you're frustrated about something else. Adora crossed her arms. What's really going on? Because this isn't about printed documents. You don't know what you're talking about. Then tell me. Because the man I've been living with for 4 months doesn't explode at the housekeeper over a printing error. So what happened? For a moment, she thought he'd stonewall her. But then his shoulders sagged slightly, the anger bleeding into exhaustion. I saw my father today. Adora went still. Obiora had never mentioned his father except in passing. Distant relationship. Hadn't spoken in years. He showed up at my office. Obiora continued, his voice hollow. First time I've seen him in 8 years. Wanted to know if the rumors about my marriage were true. Wanted to meet my wife. His laugh was bitter. Wanted to remind me that he always knew I'd have to buy a woman, because who'd choose to love someone as cold as me. Oh, that's not true, Adora said quietly. Isn't it? You married me for money. My ex left me because I'm emotionally unavailable. My father, his voice cracked slightly. He left my mother and me when I was 12 because I wasn't worth staying for. So, yeah, maybe he's right. Maybe I am fundamentally unlovable, and the only relationships I can maintain are transactional. Adora felt something crack open in her chest. She'd seen Obiora angry, professional, even playful. But this raw, broken vulnerability was new. Come with me, she said, taking his hand. He followed her to the garden, to the bench where they'd had their first real conversation months ago. The Lagos night was quiet around them, stars invisible behind city lights. Your father is wrong, Adora said firmly. You're not unlovable. You're hurt. There's a difference. You don't know that. I do, because I've spent 4 months watching you. I've seen how you take care of Patience even when you're frustrated with her. You paid for her son's school fees last month. Don't think I didn't notice. I've seen how you call your site foreman by his first name and ask about his family. I've seen how you helped that elderly woman with her rent dispute even though there was no profit in it for you. She squeezed his hand. You're not cold, Obiora. You're careful. And maybe you have a right to be, given how people have treated you. I hurt people, he said quietly. With words. I lash out when I'm cornered. You do. And you know what? You also apologize. You also try to do better. That's what growth looks like. Obiora looked at her in the dim garden light, and something in his expression made her heart race. How did you do this? He asked softly. Do what? Make me want to be better. I've spent years convinced I was fine as I was, that anyone who couldn't handle my rough edges wasn't worth my time. Then you show up, call me out on my behavior, refuse to be intimidated, and somehow... He shook his head. Somehow I want to be the man you seem to think I can be. Adora's breath caught. Obiora, I know this wasn't supposed to be real. I know we have an expiration date. But Adora, He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. You make me laugh. You challenge me. You see through my walls, but you don't run for what you find there. I don't know what this is, but it's not just friendship anymore. At least not for me. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. What are you saying? I'm saying that marrying you as a joke was the best terrible decision I ever made. I'm saying that I don't want this to end in 8 months. I'm saying... He took both her hands now, his grip warm and solid. I'm saying I'm falling for you, Adora, and I have no idea what to do about it. She should pull away, should remind him of their agreement, of the 1-year timeline, of all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Should protect her own heart before it was too late. Except it was already too late. I'm falling for you too, she whispered, and it terrifies me. Why? Because what if it's not real? What if we're just caught up in proximity and convenience? What if the moment we're not bound by our agreement? You realize you don't actually want this. Obiora stood, pulling her up with him. He was close now, so close she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Then we'll find out, he said. But Adora, I don't think this is about proximity. I think it's about you. The way you sing when you cook and don't realize it. The way you argue with me and refuse to back down when you know you're right. The way you look at the world with hope even after everything you've been through. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. I don't want to fight what I'm feeling anymore. Neither do I, she breathed. He kissed her then, soft at first, questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, when she leaned into him instead, the kiss deepened into something that erased every boundary they'd carefully maintained. This wasn't a business arrangement. This wasn't friendship. This was falling, freely and terrifyingly, into something neither had planned for. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Obiora rested his forehead against hers. So what do we do now, he asked. I don't know, but I know I don't want to do it alone. Then don't. He kissed her again, gentler this time. We figure out together. They stood there in the garden, wrapped in each other, and neither noticed a phone camera capturing them from the shadowy edge of the property. Neither saw the woman behind the camera, her face twisted with jealousy and rage. Ngozi, Obiora's ex-girlfriend, had been watching for weeks, waiting for the right moment. And now, seeing Obiora happy with someone else, seeing him give another woman the softness he'd never shown her, she knew exactly what she had to do. Destroy him. And if the wife got destroyed in the process, even better. No way. They just confess their feelings. From a fake marriage to real love. If your heart is racing right now, smash that like button. Subscribe to African Tales by Zion because the next chapter shows when the past comes back to destroy everything they're building. Comment below. Did you see this coming? Are they moving too fast, or is this real? What do you think that EX is planning? Hit that notification bell. Someone's about to try to RIP them apart. The first post appeared on Instagram at 7:23 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Adora was making breakfast, humming to herself, a habit Obiora had teased her about just a night before while pulling her into a kiss that had left them both breathless and laughing. Life in the mansion had transformed over the past month. They were no longer pretending. No more separate bedrooms. No more careful distance. They'd fallen into a rhythm that felt natural, inevitable, like puzzle pieces that had always been meant to fit together. She heard Obiora's phone buzz in the other room, then buzz again, and again, and again. What the hell? She heard him mutter. When she walked into his home office, he was staring at his phone, face drained of color. Obiora? What's wrong? He looked up, and the expression in his eyes made her stomach drop. Fear, anger, and something worse, resignation. It's Ngozi, he said quietly. My ex. You need to see this. He handed her the phone. The Instagram post was a carousel of images, Ngozi looking tearful and vulnerable, old photos of her and Obiora from 2 years ago, and a long caption that made Adaora's blood run cold. Finally breaking my silence. For 2 years I've lived in fear, but watching Obiora and Duca parade his new marriage across social media, while I suffer in silence, has become unbearable. During our relationship, Obiora was controlling, verbally abusive, and on 3 separate occasions, physically violent. I have scars I still hide. I stayed quiet because of his power, his money, his ability to destroy my reputation. But I can't watch him do this to another woman. Mrs. Nduka, if you're reading this, get out before he hurts you the way he hurt me. Hashtag domestic violence, hashtag speaking out, hashtag no more silence, hashtag protect women. The post already had 47,000 likes and thousands of comments. Adora scrolled through them, her hands shaking. I always knew he was too good to be true. Rich men like him think they can buy their way out of anything. His poor wife probably doesn't even know who she married. Believe women. Cancel this abuser. Obiora, Adora said carefully, is any of this true? He looked at her like she'd slapped him. You have to ask? I need to hear you say it. No. His voice was hard, defensive. None of it is true. I never laid a hand on her. Never. I was harsh sometimes. Yes, I said things I regretted when we argued. But physical violence? Controlling behavior? I would never. He stopped, jaw clenched. But you don't believe me. I can see it in your eyes. I do believe you, Adora said, and realized she meant it. She'd lived with this man for 5 months. She'd seen him angry, frustrated, hurt, but never violent, never cruel in the way Ngozi described. But it doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what the public believes. As at the punctuator point, Obiora's phone rang. His PR manager. The next 3 hours were chaos. Ngozi had released a statement to multiple news outlets. Blogs were running with the story. Real estate mogul accused of domestic violence. Obiora and Duca's dark secret exposed. New wife maybe next victim. Women's rights organizations were calling for investigations. Business partners were issuing statements, suspending collaboration pending clarification. Obiora's lawyer advised immediate legal action. His PR manager wanted a counterstatement. His board of directors scheduled an emergency meeting. And through it all, Obiora sat in his office, watching his reputation disintegrate in real time. Don't say anything, his lawyer advised. Denying will make you look guilty. We need to build a case, gather evidence. Evidence of what? Obiora's voice was hollow. Evidence that I didn't do something? How do you prove a negative? Adora watched in the doorway as men in expensive suits debated strategy like they were discussing stock portfolios instead of a man's entire life. And something in her, something fierce and protective, snapped into place. Everyone out, she said quietly. The suits looked at her like she was a curious interruption. Obiora's lawyer started to object. I said out. Now. Her voice carried an authority that surprised even her. When they were alone, Obiora looked up at her. You should distance yourself from this. From me. It's about to get ugly. I know. The press will dig into you. Question why you married me. Someone might figure out our arrangement started as a business deal. It could destroy your reputation, too. I know. Then why are you still here? Adora crossed the room and took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. Because I know the truth. Because I've lived with you. Because I've seen how you treat people when you think no one's watching. And because the man I know couldn't do what she's accusing you of. You barely know me. I know you better than anyone. Better than those lawyers. Better than your board. Better than any ex who left before bothering to understand you. She kissed his forehead gently. And I'm not going anywhere. Adora, listen to me. Your lawyers want to build a defensive case. That's reactive. We need to be proactive. Her mind was already working, sorting through strategies. Ngozi is making claims. We need to dismantle them. Publicly. With evidence. What evidence? It's my word against hers. Is it? Adora pulled out her phone. You said you dated for 8 months, 2 years ago. Where did you go? Who saw you together? Were there ever any incidents she could point to? We went to restaurants, events. She was always on my arm at business functions. Obiora's brow furrowed. She never went to a hospital that I know of. Never filed a police report. If I'd actually hurt her, there would be a record. Exactly. So we need to show that absence. But more than that, we need to show a pattern. What pattern? Adora was pacing now, ideas forming. Ngozi is a social media influencer, right? She thrives on attention. Let me look at her past relationships, her online history, if she's done this before. You think she's lied about other men? I think people who manipulate often have a pattern. And if I can find it. She looked at him. I need access to your social circle. People who knew both of you. Your household staff from when you dated her. Anyone who can testify to what your relationship was actually like. My staff. Obiora's eyes lit up. Patience worked for me then. So did my driver, Emeka. They were there for everything. Get them in here. Now. Over the next 6 hours, Adora conducted interviews like a prosecutor building a case. Patients confirmed that in 8 months of Ngozi visiting the house, there was never a raised voice, never a slammed door, never any sign of physical violence. Miss Ngozi was always very demanding. Patients admitted carefully. She wanted Mr. Obiora to buy her things, take her to expensive places. When he refused, she would... She hesitated. She would what? Adora pressed gently. She would threaten him. Say she'd tell people he was cruel if he didn't do what she wanted. I heard her once, after he refused to buy her a car. She said, "Be careful, Obiora. You don't want people thinking you're the kind of man who mistreats women." He told her to leave and never come back. Adora's pulse quickened. Do you remember exactly when this happened? June 2 years ago. I remember because it was my daughter's birthday, and I left work early that day. Would you be willing to testify to this publicly? Patients looked nervous. Will it help Mr. Obiora? It might save him. Then yes. Emeka, the driver, had similar stories. Ngozi demanding expensive gifts, throwing tantrums when refused, once threatening to ruin him if he broke up with her. But Adora needed more. She needed to prove this was Ngozi's pattern, not an isolated incident. She spent the next 2 days deep in digital investigation. Ngozi's Instagram went back 5 years. Adora scrolled through relationships documented in carefully curated photos, watching the pattern emerge. Wealthy boyfriend lavish gifts, relationship ends. Ngozi plays a victim. She'd done it with at least 2 men before Obiora. 1. A banker named Tund had a brief mention in a gossip blog 3 years ago. Socialite Ngozi claims ex-boyfriend was controlling, but friends say she wanted his money. Adora found Tund through LinkedIn, messaged him, waited. He called her within an hour. "You're Obiora's wife." Tund said immediately, "I saw Ngozi's post. I knew she'd do this eventually." "She did the same to you?" "Worse. When I refused to propose after 4 months, she told mutual friends I'd been emotionally abusive, spread rumors I was dating other women, that I'd stolen money from her. None of it true, but it cost me friendships, business connections." His voice was bitter. "She's a black hole of narcissism. She wants what she wants, and if you don't give it to her, she destroys you. Would you go on record?" "Hell yes. That woman ruined 6 months of my life. If I can help stop her from doing it to someone else, I'm in." Adora found another ex. And another. A pattern of manipulation, lies, weaponized victimhood. Each man had been wealthy. Each had refused her demands. Each had been smeared when he didn't comply. She compiled everything into a detailed document. Screenshots, testimonies, timelines showing Ngozi's pattern of false accusations. Then she called a press conference. Obiora's lawyers tried to stop her. "This is too risky. If you're wrong." "I'm not wrong." Adora's voice was steel. "And I'm not letting my husband be destroyed by lies." The press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. the next day. But at 10 a.m., Ngozi struck again. A second post. Photos she claimed showed bruises from Obiora's abuse. An emotional video of her crying, saying she'd been contacted by his powerful lawyers trying to silence her. This is what abusers do. They use their money and power to intimidate victims into silence. But I won't be silenced. Hashtag believe women. Hashtag justice for survivors. The post went even more viral. Protests started forming outside Obiora's office building. Major clients issued statements terminating contracts. His board called for his resignation. Adora watched it all unfold and felt her resolve harden into something unbreakable. At the press conference, she walked the podium alone. Behind her, large screens displayed the evidence she'd gathered. Obiora sat in the front row, his face unreadable. "My name is Adora Nduka," she began. "I'm Obiora Nduka's wife, and I'm here to tell you the truth about Ngozi Okafor." She laid it all out, the pattern of targeting wealthy men, the previous false accusations, the testimony from household staff, from Obiora's driver, from his business associates who'd witnessed their relationship. Ngozi claimed she was abused for 8 months. In that time, she never sought medical attention, Never filed a police report. Never confided in anyone except, conveniently, after Obiora ended their relationship. Adora pulled up timeline comparisons. The photos she claimed show abuse. The metadata shows they were taken years before she even met my husband. She showed Patience's testimony on screen. Showed messages from Tund and 2 other exes, all describing identical patterns of manipulation. I've lived with Obiora and Duca for 5 months, Adora continued, her voice strong. I know his sharp tongue. I know he can be harsh, blunt, difficult. But I have never, not once, feared for my safety. Not once seen him raise a hand in violence. Not once witnessed the monster Ngozi describes. She looked directly into the cameras. Domestic violence is real. It destroys lives. And false accusations of domestic violence are an insult to every real survivor who's ever struggled to be believed. Ngozi Okafor is not a survivor. She's a manipulator who's weaponized the hashtag #MeToo movement for personal revenge. The room erupted. Questions shouted from every direction. But Adora wasn't done. I'm releasing all our evidence to the press. Phone records, testimonies, timeline analyses, everything. I'm also announcing that we're pursuing legal action against Ms. Okafor for defamation and emotional distress. She paused. And I'm asking any other men she's targeted to come forward. Because the only way to stop a pattern of abuse, real abuse, the psychological kind she inflicts, is to expose it to light. She stepped down from the podium. Obiora met her at the stairs, and without caring about the cameras, pulled her into his arms. You didn't have to do that, he whispered against her hair. Yes, I did. You're my husband. The real kind, not the contractual kind. I love you, he said, and she felt him trembling. God, Adora, I love you so much. I love you too. She pulled back to look at him. Now let's go home and let the lawyers handle the rest. But the rest came faster than anyone expected. Within 2 hours of the press conference, investigative journalists had picked up Adora's thread. They found more X's, more false accusations, more evidence of Ngozi's systematic targeting of wealthy men. Then someone found hospital records. The injuries Ngozi claimed Obiora inflicted, the dates didn't match their relationship timeline. The doctors listed didn't exist. A video surfaced from a restaurant where Ngozi and Obiora had dined. Security footage showing her creating a scene, throwing a glass at him when he refused to buy her an expensive necklace she'd seen in a store window. Him calmly leaving while she screamed at his back. By evening, the tide had completely turned. Hashtag Justice for Obiora was trending. Women's organizations were retracting their earlier statements, acknowledging they'd been manipulated. Business partners were calling to apologize and reinstate contracts. And Ngozi, her Instagram was deleted. Her influencer sponsors dropped her. The police announced they were investigating her for filing false reports and defamation. But the damage wasn't completely undone. The stain of accusation, however false, lingered. Some people would always wonder if there was truth to it. Some contracts couldn't be recovered. Some reputational harm was permanent. That night, lying in bed with Adora, Obiora was quiet. What are you thinking? She asked. That I almost lost everything. My business, my reputation, my future. He turned to her. But the thing I was most afraid of losing was you. You couldn't lose me if you tried. You don't know that. If the evidence hadn't been there, if we couldn't prove she was lying, I would have believed you anyway. Adora said it with certainty. Because I know you. Not the public version. Not the business mogul. Not the harsh man everyone sees. I know the real you. The real me is still difficult. Still harsh sometimes. Still damaged from years of people trying to use me. I know. I married you anyway. The real you, I mean, not the arrangement, not the deal. You. Obiora kissed her, soft and desperate and grateful. When he pulled back, his eyes were serious. Our 1-year deadline is coming up. 3 more months. I know. I don't want you to leave. Ever. This started as a terrible joke, but Adora, it's become the most real thing in my life. He took her hand, pressed it to his chest where she could feel his heart racing. Marry me again. For real this time. No contracts, no deadlines. Just us, choosing each other. Adora felt tears slip down her cheeks. We're already married, you idiot. Then renew our vows. Make a promise that means something. Tell me you'll stay not because you're obligated to, but because you want to. I want to, she whispered. God, Obiora, I want so much it terrifies me. Then stay. Build a life with me. A real one. She kissed him in answer, and it felt like sealing a promise that had been building since the first moment she'd walked into his office. Desperate and proud and unwilling to give up. They'd started as enemies, become reluctant allies, transformed into friends, fallen into love, and now, tested by fire and lies and the worst of human manipulation, they'd emerged stronger. Hold on. Ngozi's lies almost destroyed everything, and Ador exposed her in front of the whole world. If you're shook right now, smash that like button. Subscribe to African Tales by Zion, because the final chapter shows if their love can survive the aftermath. Comment: was Adora a queen for defending him? Did Ngozi get what she deserved? What would you have done? Hit that notification bell. The finale is going to make you cry happy tears. 6 months later. Adora stood in front of the mirror in what used to be her room in the mansion, but was now just a guest room. She hadn't slept there in months, hadn't needed it since the night Obiora had first pulled her into his bed and whispered that he loved her. Today was different, though. Today, she needed the space to prepare. Patience knocked softly and entered with a knowing smile. You look beautiful, madam. Adora examined her reflection. The dress was traditional. A stunning burgundy and gold George wrapper and blouse, intricate beading catching the light. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo woven with gold thread. She barely recognized herself in the desperate, frightened woman who'd walked into Obiora's office 18 months ago. I can't believe we're doing this, Adora said, nerves fluttering in her stomach. Renewing your vows? Patience adjusted the wrapper's drape. It's beautiful. Starting fresh with honesty and love. Starting fresh. Yes, that's exactly what today was. The aftermath of Ngozi's exposure had been brutal but necessary. The woman had been charged with defamation, filing false police reports, and harassment. Her trial was set for next month. In the meantime, she'd become a cautionary tale, a reminder that social media outrage could be weaponized, that believing all accusations without evidence harmed real victims. Obiora's business had recovered, mostly. Some clients never came back, too worried about perception. But new ones emerged, people who respected the way he and Adora had handled the crisis with evidence and dignity instead of mudslinging. More importantly, Obiora himself had changed. The experience had cracked something open in him. He'd started therapy, to deal with my walls, he'd explained to Adora, to learn how to trust without fear. He'd reconnected with his mother, a tearful reunion that had left them both emotional wrecks. He'd even attempted reconciliation with his father, though that relationship remained complicated. But with Adora, with Patience, with his core staff, Obiora had let his guard down, laughed more, softened his sharp edges without losing his strength. He's ready for you, Patience said now, eyes twinkling, and very nervous. Adora laughed despite her own nerves. Obiora? Nervous. He's been pacing for an hour. Keeps asking if you change your mind. Never, Adora said with certainty. They decided on an intimate ceremony, just immediate family and close friends. No press, no spectacle. Just truth. Adora's father was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, looking healthier than he had in years. The kidney transplant had worked. He'd regained weight, color, vitality. Looking at him now, Adora could hardly remember the frail man who'd been dying just 2 years ago. My daughter, Chief Okafor said, emotion thick in his voice. You look just like your mother on our wedding day. Papa, already married, Adora reminded him gently. But you weren't married with my blessing, with understanding, with love. He took her hands. When you first told me you'd married Obiora, I was confused, grateful for his help. Yes, but confused about the rushed wedding, the stranger you'd bound yourself to. He smiled. I'm not confused anymore. I've watched you two together. That man loves you with everything he is. And you love him the same way. I do, Adora whispered. Then let's go make it official in the eyes of God and family. The ceremony took place in the mansion's garden, the same garden where Obiora and Adora had first begun to lower their walls. Chairs were arranged in intimate rows, decorated with white and gold flowers. Soft music played from hidden speakers. And there, under an arch woven with roses and traditional fabrics, stood Obiora. He wore full traditional Igbo attire, a burgundy and gold wrapper and shirt that perfectly complemented her outfit. When he saw her walking toward him, his composure cracked. Tears slipped down his face, and he didn't bother hiding them. Adora reached him, her own eyes wet. Chief Okafor placed her hand in Obiora's. "Take care of my daughter," Chief said simply. "With my life," Obiora promised. The pastor, a warm, elderly man who'd known Obiora's mother for decades, smiled at them. "We gather today not for a first wedding, but for a renewal of vows, a transformation from contract to covenant, from arrangement to authentic love. Obiora, Adora, you began this journey in unusual circumstances, but God has a way of making beautiful things from broken pieces." Obiora went first, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Adora, when you walked into my office 18 months ago, I saw you as a problem to solve, a way to prove something to myself. Maybe I didn't know I was looking at my future, at the woman who would teach me what love actually means." He squeezed her hands. "You've seen me at my worst, harsh, defensive, cruel with words. You've seen me broken, scared, under attack. And you stayed. Not because you had to, but because you chose to." His voice cracked. "I spent my whole life building walls to protect myself from being hurt. You didn't tear them down. You showed me it was safe to open the gate. I love you, not because of our arrangement, not because you saved me from Ngozi, but because you're the first person who ever made me want to be vulnerable. And I promise to spend the rest of our lives being worthy of the faith you place in me." Adora couldn't see through her tears, but she didn't need to. She felt Obiora's hands solid and warm in hers, anchoring her. "Obiora," she began, voice trembling, "I married you the first time out of desperation, out of love for my family, out of necessity. I expected to endure a year with a cruel man and then escape." She laughed wetly. "Instead, I found my home. I found someone who challenges me, respects me, sees me as an equal partner. I found someone whose rough edges fit perfectly with mine." She looked up at him, not caring that she was crying. "You're not the man I thought you were. You're so much better. You're complicated and sometimes frustrating and still too harsh when you're scared. But you're also generous and loyal and capable of such deep love once you trust someone enough to show it. I don't want to renew our vows because I'm obligated to. I want to renew them because I can't imagine my life without you in it. You're my best friend, my partner, and the love I never knew I needed. I choose you, today and every day after." They exchanged new rings, simple gold bands with their names engraved inside, replacing plain rings they bought for the civil ceremony. "By the power vested in me," the pastor said with a warm smile, "I now pronounce you still married, but this time with your whole hearts. Obiora, you may kiss your wife." Again, Obiora pulled Adora close and kissed her like he was sealing a promise that would last lifetimes. The small gathering erupted in applause and tears. At the reception dinner, held at long tables in the garden under string lights, the toast began. Chaik, Adora's brother, stood first. "I'm the reason this marriage happened. I took a dangerous loan, put my family at risk, forced my sister into an impossible choice." He looked at Obiora. "I've apologized to her 100 times. But watching them now, I'm starting to think maybe I don't need to apologize. Maybe I gave her the push toward exactly where she needed to be." He raised his glass. "To the worst joke ever told, that became the best thing that ever happened to both of you." Obiora's mother stood next, elegant and emotional. "My son spent so many years alone, convinced he was better off without love. I prayed for someone strong enough to break through his walls, patient enough to wait for him to trust, and fierce enough to fight for him when he couldn't fight for himself." She smiled at Adora. "God answer my prayers. Welcome to our family, officially and permanently." Patience added her toast. I've worked for Mr. Obiora for 10 years. I've seen him build an empire. But I've never seen him truly happy until Mrs. Adora came into his life. She didn't just marry my boss. She brought home my friend. That's worth celebrating. As the evening wore on, filled with laughter and music and dancing, Adora found herself pulled aside by her father. Walk with me, he said. They strolled through the garden, away from the party's warmth. I need to tell you something, Chief began. When you first told me about Obiora's offer, marry him and he'd pay our debt, I was horrified. I told you to find another way. Do you remember? I remember, and I told you there was no other way. You were right, but Adora, I've carried guilt this whole time. Guilt that my illness forced you into this arrangement. Guilt that your sense of duty to our family cost you your freedom of choice. He stopped walking, turned to face her. But tonight, watching you and Obiora together, I realized something. You didn't lose your freedom. You used it. You chose to save us. Yes, but then you chose to stay. Chose to love him. Chose to build something real from an impossible situation. His voice grew thick. I'm not sorry anymore, because my daughter is stronger and braver than I ever knew, and she found love in the last place anyone would look for it. Adora hugged her father tight. I love you, Papa. I love you too, my dear, and I'm proud of you. Later, when the guests had left and the garden was quiet except for the soft glow of string lights, Obiora found Adora sitting on their bench, the bench where everything had started to change. He sat beside her, pulling her close. Hello, wife. Hello, husband. How does it feel, being married for real this time? Exactly the same as yesterday, Adora said with a smile, which is kind of the point. We've been real for months. Today was just making it official. Still, it means something. Standing in front of everyone we love, choosing each other publicly. Obiora was quiet for a moment. I never thought I'd have this. Family gathered to celebrate love. A wife who knows everything about me and stays anyway. A future that doesn't terrify me. Doesn't terrify you at all? Adora teased. Well, maybe a little. In a good way. He kissed the top of her head. I have news. Oh, you know that foundation we talked about starting? For families drowning in medical debt? The one we've been planning for months? Yes. I met with the lawyers this week. It's official. The Okafor and Duca Foundation for Medical Relief. We launch next month. He turned her to face him. Your father won't be the last person saved from impossible debt. We're making sure of it. Adora felt her eyes well up again. Using our story to help others? Using our second chance to give others their first chance. Obiora smiled. It feels right. Like maybe all the pain, yours, mine, what we went through, maybe it can mean something bigger. You're an amazing man, you know that? Only because I married an amazing woman who refuses to let me be anything less. They sat in comfortable silence, wrapped in each other under the stars. Remember when I told you no woman would marry you? Adora said eventually. Obiora laughed. How could I forget? Those words haunted me for 3 years. I was so wrong. You were absolutely right. No woman would have married the man I was then. Harsh, closed off, impossible to love. He tilted her chin up to meet his eyes. But you didn't marry that man. You married the man I became because of you. We became better together, Adora corrected. You taught me I could be strong and soft at the same time. That asking for help isn't weakness. That love doesn't have to be complicated. Sometimes it's just choosing someone every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard, Obiora agreed. A thought struck Adora. What are you going to tell people when they ask how we met? The truth. His eyes gleamed with mischief. That I humiliated my future wife at a business event. She told me I was unmarriageable, and 3 years later she proved herself right by marrying me anyway. Initially for money, eventually for love. Adora laughed until tears ran down her face. That's a terrible meet-cute. It's our meet-cute, and I wouldn't change a single moment. Not the humiliation, not the joke that went too far, not the arrangement, not even Ngozi's attack. Because all of it led us here. He stood, pulling her up with him. Come on, Mrs. Nduka. Let's go home. We are home. I know, but I meant our bedroom. I have plans for my wife on our re-wedding night. Oh, really? Do these plans involve talking? Eventually, but not right away. They walked back to the mansion hand in hand, leaving the garden lights glowing behind them like captured stars. The Okafor and Duca Foundation's second annual gala was being held at Eco Hotel, the same venue where Obiora and Adora had first met and clashed 5 years ago. Adora stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd of donors, beneficiaries, and supporters. Beside her, a large screen showed photos of families the foundation had helped. Medical bills paid, lives saved, future secured. 2 years ago, Adora began, "My husband and I started this foundation because we understood what it meant to face impossible debt for the sake of saving someone you love. We understood the desperation, the fear, the terrible choices that desperation forces you to make." Beside her, Obiora reached over and squeezed her hand. "Since then, we've helped 247 families avoid the choice I had to make. We've paid 890 million Nigerian nairas in medical debt. We've saved lives." She paused, emotion catching in her throat. "But we haven't just saved lives. We preserved dignity. Because no one should have to choose between their family's survival and their own freedom. No one should have to marry a stranger to save their father." The room was silent, attentive, though, Adora continued with a small smile, "I do have to say, marrying a stranger worked out pretty well for me in the end." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Obiora grinned. "The foundation is my husband's heart made tangible," Adora said. Obiora and Duca spent years being called harsh, cold, unmarriageable. But I've learned that the harshest exteriors often protect the softest hearts. And the man beside me has a heart bigger than any building he's ever constructed. She gestured to Obiora, who stood and joined her at the podium. Together, they looked out at the crowd. "We're expanding," Obiora announced. "Starting next month, the foundation will also offer interest-free business loans to families recovering from medical crises. Because saving a life is only the first step. We want to help people rebuild their futures." The applause was thunderous. Later, as they drove home through Lagos at night, Adora leaned her head on Obiora's shoulder. "Tired?" he asked. "Happy tired. The good kind." "Same." He kissed the top of her head. "You were brilliant tonight. We were brilliant together." They pulled up the mansion, their home, no longer a prison but a sanctuary they built together through honesty and effort and choosing each other every single day. Inside, Patience had left a note on the kitchen counter. "Dinner in the warmer. Don't stay up too late. You have that early meeting tomorrow, Mr. Obiora. And Mrs. Adora, your mother called. She's bringing the family over on Sunday. Love, Patience." Obiora laughed. "She mothers us." "Someone has to. We forget to eat if she didn't remind us." They ate dinner together at the same table where they'd first begun to be friends instead of adversaries, where harsh words had softened into conversations, where walls had crumbled into intimacy. "I have something for you," Obiora said suddenly. "It's not my birthday." "I know, but I saw this and thought of you." He handed her a small wrapped box. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with 2 pendants, a small house and a small heart intertwined. "The house is for the home we built," Obiora explained. "The heart is for the love we found in it. I had it made custom." Adora's eyes filled with tears, happy ones, the kind she'd grown accustomed to since marrying this complicated, beautiful man. "Help me put on?" He fastened it around her neck, his fingers gentle against her skin. She turned to face him, the pendants resting just above her heart. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too. Still seems impossible sometimes." "What does?" "That you're real, that this is real, that I get to keep you. You're stuck with me. Forever. No escape clause, no 1-year deadline. Just us indefinitely. Best terrible joke I ever told," Obiora said, echoing Chaik's toast from their vow renewal. "Best terrible joke I ever accepted." They kissed in their kitchen, in their home, in the life they'd built from the ruins of pride and the foundation of choice. Outside, Lagos hummed with its usual chaos. Traffic and noise and millions of lives intersecting and diverging. But inside, in the quiet of their mansion that was finally, truly a home, two people who'd started as enemies held each other and marveled at the miracle of finding love in the last place they'd ever thought to look. In each other. The end.